chippy as it may be. This has been partially on my radar for most of the summer, and then recently I was catching up, and there's a project in Trumansburg, Hamilton Square, affordable housing. Ooh, that word. Nobody likes that word.
Right,
I mentioned
apparently.
that yesterday in my column in the Finger Lakes Times. No one likes that word. So the plan in Trumansburg calls for between 70 and 80 units of mixed income rental and ownership, kind of like they want to sell a little over a dozen of them outright, and the rest of them, like 40-some units, will wind up being rentals to a range of incomes. So just going through some of the stories. I haven't been to any of the meetings yet, and I actually kind of want to get to one of these planning board or zoning board meetings in the next couple months to get a feel for what this is really like. But seeing some of the quotes that have come out from just residents, just people,
Right.
to me kind of speak volumes for the way people talk about affordable housing in general without actually understanding what affordable housing is or even understanding the benefit that it has on especially rural communities. So a couple of these quotes. One resident asked during a meeting, "Have you asked us outright if we want this project?" Right. We're here because we have to do your jobs, referring to a zoning or a planning board. This will bring crime, transient types, and other assorted bad things. This is sort of the messaging that the community is giving to these developers who want to spend money in their community. Right. One, on the economic development front, that's crazy. But it's also really insulting. So a couple of things that I wanted to kind of point out. Planning and zoning boards, they don't have the authority to pick and choose what developments or what developers come into their community or what happens on private property. They're reviewing plans. They're basing decisions on local law, code, that sort of thing, and development in general. It requires an open-mindedness. And when I see a lot of these quotes and I see the way people are speaking, and you're talking about a lot of like residents who have been in these communities, and I'm picking on Trumansburg right now, but I've seen this happen elsewhere, where there's this fear of the poor. Like they're going to bring crime. Right. Who's they? Right. Criminals do crime. Right. If you make, less than, say, if you're a single person and you're making less than $20,000 a year or $15,000 a year, and you are considered living within the whatever the poverty guidelines are, you aren't by definition a criminal just because you don't make a lot of money. Right. It's this kind of, and I understand wanting to have the established guidelines as far as, what comes in so that things look right and they're clean, and you want your community to present itself a certain way. That's fine. But an affordable housing project in a rural community is necessary. Yeah. And I always kind of, looking at these projects, and I always think to myself, how many of the people who are criticizing the project are actually low income and could benefit from said project?
Well, in this case, probably a lot of them. Yeah.
Of course. And it's the obvious socioeconomic breakdown of these rural communities. Right. Income is dropping and jobs are fewer and far between. You've got an aging groups, and they're living on fixed incomes. It's absolutely wild to me to listen to the narrow-minded approach that, and I'm coming off really blunt right now because it's insane. And I've heard a few people try and politicize it and say, liberal Democrats from Ithaca are trying to push these types of projects. I am a registered Republican, and I cannot imagine listening to any person at all say the things that they have been saying. That some of these residents, and I can't even say some, it's literally most of the people who come out to these meetings in most of these communities, in particular Trumansburg. Right. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to this project, I don't have a dog in the fight, right? I have no affiliation with what's going on. But I will say, given some of the stuff that I would like to see and would like to help do in Geneva, I certainly have support for mixed income housing developments because, I mean, just economically, they have been proven to be the best possible type of housing arrangement that you can have in your community.
What's the harm?
Right.
It's the best of all worlds. It is literally a compromise from exclusively low-income housing opportunities.
And that, I think, is the problem. I think what we're seeing happen now is that the historic approach to affordable housing has been, and I'm sure this is going to irritate a bunch of people, but has been developers or nonprofits partnering up to create the minimal passable unit for the most amount they're allowed to charge to a certain income range and doing the least amount of maintenance over time. And the way that you help your costs is to consolidate and to do these big block, nondescript housing projects where you just warehouse poor people. And, I mean, if you look at some of the pushback, I mean, this is what Ontario County's grappling with right now. You tell people that there needs to be more affordable housing in Victor, and they wave their arms and scream in fear and terror because what they have in their head is a housing authority style segregated community where poor people go
almost a ghetto style
when they're not working 3 jobs to try to make ends meet, right?
Yep.
And that has been the biggest disservice to increasing economic opportunity for people is this profit-driven model, which people will say, well, it's nonprofit, but you know, this money-driven model of warehousing people. So a mixed income community, I look at the Trumansburg project and they're talking about a set number of units are sold at market rate. A set number of units are sold at an affordable rate, which means they're partially subsidized. A set number of units are rented at market rate. A set number of units are rented and are subsidized. That is the perfect mix. That is what you should be creating, an actual neighborhood with real people from a diversity of economic backgrounds. This idea that you have these wealthy, affluent suburbs or rural areas, and then these pockets of poverty is what is killing our communities. Because it's bad for everybody. But people don't see that because they don't like change and they like the way they've always done it. And in their head, they imagine that affordable housing means what poverty housing has been for years. And it's a changing model because people who actually care about people don't want to be participating in that.